Hello everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final event in the Let's Do It in the Cloud webinar series. My name is Michelle Nerlinger, and I'll be managing this session for you. Over the past 4 weeks, guest presenters from Agilist Solutions, Dell Boomi, IDC, SafeNet, and Zuora have been sharing tips, tricks, and best practices for conquering some of the most challenging obstacles associated with cloud service delivery. We are lucky to have many of those executives back on the line for today's session. Today's virtual panel, Doing SaaS Right, Putting Together All the Pieces, will be moderated by industry-renowned Jeff Kaplan, Managing Director of Think Strategies, a strategic consulting company founded in 2001 to help clients capitalize on the migration of the technology industry from a product-centric to a services-driven business model. Please keep in mind that the intent of this session is to answer your questions. We hope that we can leverage your experiences, concerns, and questions to really drive the topic and flow of today's panel. That said, let me walk you through the various ways you can participate. Questions and comments can be submitted at any time during the live webcast. Simply click the questions button on your screen to enter your question. For those of you social media users on the line, we also encourage you to join the conversation on Twitter. Please use hashtag LDIITC, short for Let's Do It in the Cloud. Finally, since we always get this question, yes, an on-demand replay of today's event and all the other events in the series will be made available immediately after today's session via BrightTalk, which is the online webcast platform you're dialed into now. Without any further ado, I'll at this point hand the session over to Jeff Kaplan to get the panel started.
Hey, well, thanks, Michelle, and thank you all for joining us today. I am very excited to be a part of this session for a couple of reasons, because first and foremost, I think it's been a terrific series and one that I'm hopeful that all of you have had an opportunity to listen into and to even participate in it wherever possible. But what this session also provides is an opportunity for anyone who has not had that privilege of listening to each and every one of the previous sessions to get a recap of what was covered, maybe even a little bit of encouragement to go back and listen to those archived sessions. But most importantly, I hope to provide an engaging and interesting conversation among not only 4 of the key executives and experts in this marketplace, but also 4 folks who I consider friends and have always enjoyed talking to, not only in settings like this, but in other kinds of settings as well. We won't talk about the beers we've shared, for instance. But anyways, the point of the matter is that what I think they've already done in this series is a great job of pointing out from each of their own points of view what it takes to build a successful SaaS business in this increasingly competitive marketplace. And from Think Strategies' standpoint, we have the best of all worlds really represented here. We've got a development point of view, we've got a billing and licensing point of view, as well as an integration point of view. These are 4 of the key building blocks which are essential for developing and delivering successful SaaS solutions in this increasingly competitive and rapidly evolving marketplace. So I want to play the role of referee as well as facilitator here and allow each of these great folks to provide their additional insights over the course of this hour about where we stand with the development of this marketplace and where this marketplace is going and what it takes to be successful and be a leader in this changing competitive environment. Now, as Michelle pointed out, we want you to get involved in the conversation as well, so don't hesitate to throw questions at us, and we'll do our best to throw those questions at our panel as well. But why don't we do this? Why don't we start with a brief recap of where we've been in this webinar series. And what I'd like each of our panelists to do is quickly recap the key points they tried to convey during their individual or dedicated webinar in this series, and maybe even point out a point or two that they didn't have enough time to talk about during that previous hour, that they want to make sure that you as attendees of not only this session, but hopefully listeners to those other sessions as well, should take away as key points as you're thinking about how to develop a successful business in this SaaS marketplace. So let's start with you, Eileen. You had an opportunity to talk about some of the development aspects of this new area called SaaS in the cloud. Tell us a little bit more about what you try to cover in your session, and maybe some additional points you'd like to kick off this new discussion around as we talk over this coming hour.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you to everybody who is attending this webinar. So first of all, my webinar was really from the point of view of moving to from on-premise to on-demand to a software as a service, in sort of mainly the development aspects of it. But some of the things, a key thing that I really was trying to stress was planning is really the key. I mean, I don't think that's any different in any sort of development you do. You really have to plan. But the planning has to start with the business objectives, understanding what product you really want in the SaaS market, what's going to the cloud and why, what your financial model will be, what really is your market, because unless you have a good understanding of that, the developers may be building the wrong product. Then, of course, there's all of the technology aspects of planning that have to be done, and that should come next. And for instance, some of the things in the technology considerations are how much of your existing on-premise product can really be used? How much can you leverage out of the code or the structure or whatever can really be used? Or is it something that you're just going to throw away? And a lot of that depends on, are you doing the same thing or not? The other thing are, all the architectural and design implications, particularly going to a multi-tenant an architecture for SaaS. And also deciding if you really are going to evolve from where you are or build something new. So those are all really key questions that need to be asked. And I went through a case study that really showed how evolution was possible, particularly if you had a reasonably suitable architecture. Now, as far as some things that I didn't get to really talk about that I still think are very important, one of them is the testing model. There's all the usual things that you do in testing for development, unit test, functional test, transaction testing, all of those. But about going to the cloud adds a whole new dimension, and that's the whole idea of load testing, given that you have several clients all working on your product in the cloud, and many users of each of those. So how do you make sure, and how do you test for the fact that you really can handle all of that in the cloud? And so that is so there are different considerations about what you need to do in testing. The other thing is security. Security is always an issue in software development, particularly if there's a lot of sensitive data. And in the cloud, there are not only is it sensitive, but people don't believe that you can really make the data secure in the cloud. I mean, how many things you read a lot of the literature, people are saying, I'm not sure I want to go to the cloud because I'm not sure I trust the cloud. And that's mainly the privacy of the data. So you really have to have a strategy not only about how you segregate the end data, you also have to have a way of proving to your customers that the security is there. So making sure there are monitors or logs that end users can monitor and see that their data, who is touching their data, being able to do audits at any point in time, talking about how data will be handled across global jurisdictions, and also being able to understand how you are going to help them enforce their security policies. So those are some of the things that I didn't really get to talk about.
Well, we'll talk about those and other topics more during this hour, and we're already starting to get a few questions flowing in, but I'm going to hold on having us respond to those until I go around the horn and get everybody else's recap of some of the key points that we've already tried to convey during the course of this series. So thanks, Eileen, for getting us started. And Rick, tell us a little bit more about what you were doing in your session and trying to cover there, and any points you want to make sure we convey during this last hour of the series.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. So the Boomi session was focused around helping ISVs think through your integration strategy. Boomi spends a lot of time working with ISVs and really trying to understand when does integration come up, and when does it impact your business. It impacts you, for example, during your sales cycle. Customers will, and our partners tell us, from 1/3 to 2/3 of their deals, and sometimes higher, demand integration be delivered as part of the solution. Integration is typically during the implementations, integration is typically the longest part of the implementation project, and retention. An integrated customer is statistically proven to be less likely to churn. And so, what is the right strategy? The other interesting thing about cloud is it changes a little bit who's actually buying the solution. And that impacts, who's actually dealing with the integration problem. In many cases, the solution provider ends up having to deal with the integration problem versus the end customer dealing with it. And so we focus on being able to help these providers start to think through this problem by sharing these types of best practices. We spoke about how to think about your API. Your API is kind of your starting point, making sure that it's thought of as part of the product, owned by product management, just like any other, module of your application. Enabling access to that API, at least to some degree, as part of your offering, from the beginning. Those are sort of things we've seen other solution providers have a lot of success with. And then from the API is what's the operational strategy? So what do we actually want to deliver when we think about integration? So where do we have opportunities to deliver pre-built or packaged integrations? Some of our partners will identify common applications. It could be QuickBooks in the small end. It could be a Microsoft Dynamics product in the mid-market. It could be SAP in the large enterprise. And so how can we package that integration and encapsulate the best practices that we know customers will tend to see, over and over again in those projects, and really get scale there, not have to be custom coding these things or having to do a lot of rework over and over again. And then finally we talked about the other aspect of that operational strategy, that starting off by sort of defining what are we going to actually deliver, and then the next step is, what role do my teams play in my company in integration? So for example, certainly the sales team is going to get hit with what's your integration story? How do we tell that? How do we speak it in English, and not have to get into APIs and SOAP and data maps and connectors? The services team, what type of proficiency does my professional services organization need around integration? My product management team and thinking through and designing those packaged integrations. My support team, when the integration breaks, no matter how I built it or delivered it, customer is going to call my support team. So what's the processes I put in place to think through that? And then finally, the role of systems integrators. The SIs that can help and augment the delivery of your solution as an ISV, and the integration competency they can kind of bring along with that. And then finally, we talked through case studies. Again, it's always helpful to have examples, but OEM partners of Boomi's, like Coupa, Primo, Zuora. We have Jeff on the call today, that have done these types of things with Boomi and seen success in being able to close their deal faster or shorten their implementation time or ensure their customers are getting the appropriate value out of the solution by making sure it's integrated, things like that. So that was really our focus.
That's great, Rick. And both you and Eileen have already brought up two important points which build on a pivotal mindset issue when it comes to both SaaS and the cloud, and that is when the vendor moves down this path, they're assuming responsibility for all of the piece parts that are essential for the success of the customer, whether it's the performance of the application, the integration of the application, the availability of the application, and of course, Jeff, you're all about making sure that the billing process works properly. So tell us what you're doing in that space and what you tried to cover during your session of this series.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I think the other panelists kind of summed up really why we're all here today. Let's do it in the cloud. I think we're all rallying around a common shared vision that more and more businesses, more and more companies, more and more applications will be moved to the cloud. And as it relates to Zuora and our topic around monetization and pricing and packaging strategies, what we tend not to do is just get in the weeds and talk about billing. The first and most important thing that companies need to consider is, what is the pricing model that I want to launch? How do I want to get to market? How do I want to attack different segments and different types of customers? And once I do that, how am I now able to sign up customers really, really fast? How am I able to connect into a licensing and provisioning application such as SafeNet, which is why I think there's a great synergy between Zuora and SafeNet. And then once I have all these things in place, how do I seamlessly integrate with applications and infrastructure either inside the firewall or outside of the firewall? And that's where the Zuora and Boomi partnership really is strong. As the question that we get from IT, from CIOs is, I don't want to do things in silos, and I want to have everything kind of threaded together and seamless, so that from the point of pricing to orders all the way to billing and payments, everything is connected. So my takeaway from really this series and the webinar that I did with Jake was really we are seeing more and more companies come out to us and say, we want to move from an on-premise model to a software as a service model. How do I do that? It's a different way to think about things. It's a different way to approach the technology as well as the business. And that is what's really, really exciting is I think there's just a lot of great enthusiasm for moving to the cloud.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff. Now, Jake, that brings us to you. First and foremost, congratulations. This has been a terrific series in which you have helped to bring together some of the leading minds as well as some of the leaders in the industry from a functional point of view in 4 very key areas. Since this was your brainchild, with Michelle and the rest of the staff over there at SafeNet, talk a little bit more about what you saw in terms of the goals and the takeaways for this series, and where you think that puts us today as we try to put a ribbon around this thing and provide some bottom line insights to the attendees today.
Yeah, glad to. Well, it might be helpful to kind of start with how we got started with this webinar series. Licensing and what we do as a business is kind of an interesting place to be in, because we kind of get pulled into several discussions and sometimes all at the same time. From a technology standpoint, we obviously get pulled in. How do we integrate with ISV's application? How does our technology fit in and support and work with an ISV's application? And then from a business standpoint, we get pulled in with regards to the license model. How are you selling your products, and who your customers are? So we kind of get pulled in. And even from a billing standpoint, once you've figured out how you're going to sell to them, then how are you going to bill and collect payment? So we get pulled into a lot of discussions with our customers, and that's really resonated with us, and it's driven us to form really strong partnerships, from development to integrations to billing, et cetera. Because it's a natural byproduct of how we interact with our customers. So that's kind of how we got here to this webinar series, and even before that with the partnerships that we've been forming throughout the industry. So with that as a backdrop, I've had the benefit of being able to participate in this webinar series along with this great group. And I guess from my view, some of the key points are, I've already highlighted it, obviously here, is really the need to partner. Partnership is kind of an age-old thing. It's, nobody can do everything by themselves. They need to rally expertise. And that's probably as true in a SaaS cloud-based offering as anything that has come before it. But it really feels like, there's a lot of great companies out there who have developed a lot of expertise and have pushed the edge forward, and it's really important to leverage those companies that are out there doing that, such as the folks here. So that's one.
Jake, it's interesting. Let me just interject on that point. As you recall, last week we saw each other at an event that Think Strategies hosted, the Cloud Channel Summit, and one of the points that was made on the first panel session was how we've been able in the cloud to move away from what the one CEO referred to as Barney partnerships. Those are PR only relationships which look nice in a press release but never seem to amount to anything. What you've been talking about here is how the cloud allows us to more tangibly deliver value more quickly because of APIs and other ways, mechanics, I guess we would call it, that help companies work more tightly with one another to deliver value to their mutual customers.
Yeah, I guess the saying that the whole is much greater than the individual parts, and that definitely is happening out of these partnerships. So partnership is definitely one. The next is flexibility. Flexibility in the solutions and that you implement within your overall offering. So I think everybody here represents flexibility in how they serve their customers and how their technology ultimately will change and evolve as their customers' business needs change. I mean, just to run through the examples, Boomi is a great platform, lots of options to integrate a variety of systems. So I can imagine, a customer of Boomi starting out with QuickBooks, and as they grow and evolve, swapping out that connection for a larger ERP system over time, or realizing that QuickBooks isn't going to cut it, no offense to QuickBooks, and dropping Zuora in place and using the Zuora connector. So I can see how that flexibility from an integration standpoint, just one example of many, really serves Boomi's customers. And then look at Zuora. I mean, Zuora can bill, invoice, and collect payments in a variety of ways, and can do so very quickly and flexibly. I mean, that's the kind of solutions that you want in your environment. And Sentinel Cloud, from a licensing and entitlement standpoint, does the same thing. We can license in the old traditional on-premise ways if your SaaS offering needs to be sold to a kind of a traditional customer who's still thinking perpetual, God forbid. But at the same time, we can sell in the most kind of cutting edge ways with multiple layers of one-time models, recurring usage, post-paid, prepaid. So the flexibility is there as your business changes. So I think that's another key takeaway. And then the last one, and this is kind of just common sense, but SaaS is different. Cloud-based offerings are definitely different, and there's things that are different that you need to consider. But the basics remain the same. You still need to have a good plan. You need to have a good set of business strategy, and you need to execute. So don't forget those things. And especially if you're new to this, definitely look for others that have done it before you to partner with and help you along the way.
Well, and that last point I think is important because too often we try to sell something that we don't necessarily practice ourselves. And in the SaaS and cloud marketplace, one of the key value propositions we're trying to sell is that you should no longer try to build your own software if you're an IT or business decision maker within a corporate environment, or build your own applications and customize them and try to integrate them and just create a mess for yourself when, in fact, cloud vendors have tried to simplify that process for you. Unfortunately, too often some of those same cloud vendors and SaaS providers, or ISVs in particular, think they need to build out their own capabilities in-house when it comes to development skills and integration capabilities and billing and all the rest. And it's ironic, maybe it's appropriate, that one of the first questions that we've gotten from our audience is just around that very topic. It's what are your thoughts on taking the business risk of moving one or more of your business processes, like billing or integration, to a third-party SaaS company rather than building it in-house? So let's go around the horn and talk about that. Jeff, you're in the billing space. Why should someone go to you when they think they can actually do it themselves?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think it comes down to a couple things. One is speed to market. You want to get to market fast, and do you divert your resources on trying to build out kind of billing capabilities and pricing capabilities, or do you leverage a common framework and platform? The second thing is what's core and what's your core bread and butter that's going to drive revenue. Typically, companies don't think about kind of the billing infrastructure as something that is really kind of on the front end of really optimizing, market share or optimizing how you launch something net new into a segment. So I think that those are the two reasons why I would say that most companies in this day and age don't decide to go out and build their own billing system. Look what Salesforce.com did back in the early 2000s when I was at Salesforce.com. There were a lot of CIOs out there that said, I can just go build my own CRM. I can use different access databases and do all this stuff and cobble things together. And look what's happened now. Salesforce has built a multi-billion-dollar industry, and nobody even thinks about building their own CRM tool today. And we think it's the same with billing. Nobody wants to have the headache and pain of building and maintaining and supporting a homegrown billing system over time. And I think that would apply to all the other panelists here on the call as well.
Well, I think you're right, and that's probably the general premise that you go at this with in the integration space, I would think, Rick. A lot of folks have the misconception that with all these APIs floating around, it should be easy to integrate between solutions, and in many cases it is far easier than it would be in the traditional on-premise world. But as you well know, because you live it on a daily basis, there's a lot of complications that can go along with that, and you guys have been trying to solve that for a while. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I mean one of the interesting things about integration is it's never static. Integration sits in between all of your applications, and your applications are always changing, and so the integrations end up having to change with that, and the universe of potential things that you may need to connect to is also always changing, and it's growing, and so trying to take that on in-house becomes you start to get on this treadmill that's hard to get off of. You end up having to build more and more of these connectors to these apps, and then you end up having to change the ones you've already built in addition to adding more, and it gets really, really hard. The value proposition for an integration, I think, also begins to become pretty clear. And the other aspect of that question, that I'll touch on is the notion of SaaS on SaaS. So the notion of relying on another cloud solution versus actually building something in your own data center. I think that one comes down to working with a cloud provider that you can establish a trust relationship with. How transparent are they? I don't look at it as you're sort of outsourcing. You're not outsourcing your billing to Zuora. You're still setting up and managing it yourself. How you want your billing to work. But Zuora is making sure that they're continuing to innovate on that platform, and they're on the hook to make sure that the solution stays up and online. That's the same thing with Boomi. With integration, we take on the responsibility to make sure that the integration is running and continues to run. So we provide a lot of transparency around our uptime. How have we been doing in that? And really, I think that transparency and building that trust relationship is one of the ways you get over that hurdle of viewing it like you're sort of throwing it over the wall. You still have the control with a cloud-based solution, but you're building a long-term partnership with that provider. I guess that's kind of the way I think about it.
I think that's absolutely correct. Now, Eileen, you're probably in the most sensitive position when it comes to this whole question about where I, as a ISV who's thinking about moving to SaaS, when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about, okay, can I out-task or outsource my billing, or can I out-task or outsource my integration? Well, when I'm thinking about software development, when I think about handing it off to a third party, that really makes me uncomfortable. Convince me as to why I should be thinking otherwise.
Well, that's always one of those things as we talk to our clients is how little they know about some of this. Like, for instance, one of the questions that I was asked in my webinar is, what do the customers think about licensing? And, it's amazing because everybody we talk to is pretty much, I'm going from on-premise to on-demand. Well, they haven't thought about what the different licensing models could be. They also haven't thought about what the different billing models could be. And so from our point of view, we like the partnership idea too with people like SafeNet, like Zora, people like that, because they also provide expertise to these software companies that they can provide some consulting as what they could do and possibly provide different avenues of revenue that they haven't even thought of, different ways to possibly support, and then also see that they really don't need to learn all the different aspects of what's needed to deliver their product, and to concentrate on what really is their core, and that's really the domain of what they are really trying to provide their customer. All the rest is support, and so the thing is as long as we can convince them that the rest is support, then we can show them that going to some of the best in class or people that can help them do even a better job at their product, is a convincing argument to them.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about that. Now, it's interesting. We have a very specific question that's popped up here that I think Jeff and Jake can respond to, and that's the question around right to support and the licensing information that goes along with the third-party software application integration in those situations. Now, maybe Rick, you have something to say about this as well. But let's start with Jeff and Jake. What's your response to the questions around the right to support issue and the licensing associated with that?
Yeah, this is Jake. I'd love to just jump in and say I think this is really a joint solution, meaning that if you think about the whole delivery of a service to a customer, you need to bring on that customer, you need to create that subscription for them, you need to be prepared to bill and invoice that customer, and that's really where Zora comes in. And I'll let Jeff add to that. But then once you've done that, then you need to entitle those set of rights that whatever has been purchased, that subscription, and then you need to license and basically control the use of those rights over time. So that's really where we come in, the licensing and entitlement bit. So there's a real nice natural integration between our two solutions where we control access to the features and within the scope of the license model for whatever a customer is subscribed to, really that licensing part, while Zora handles the subscription operations, the management, the billing, all that. Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, just to elaborate, I think I'm going to put myself in the shoes of an ISV or a developer. You're building an application, and you want to have flexibility. So you want to have flexibility to say, okay, out of this product or application that I'm building or SaaS service, I want to carve out different editions. I want to have an SMB edition and a mid-market and enterprise edition. And with that, right, you are now able to say, I'm going to have a different price point for these SMB customers, and I'm going to have a different price point for the larger customers. And from a licensing and entitlement standpoint, you have control and flexibility to say, for the low-end customers, well, they don't need 100 features. We only need to provide them with the need to have 25 of these features. And for everybody else, you give all the features, and then you can carve out, are there add-on options? Are there upsell features? So from an ISV perspective, leveraging the combination of really kind of best-of-breed applications gives you the ability to have full control of how you support your application from the build process, from the actual deployment process, and then ongoing. Think about, maybe your customers say, well, I really want one of these 2 or 3 features that aren't supported. Well, you can then just kind of move them over from, your enterprise edition and say, you know what, we're going to add these 2 features to our SMB edition. So I think you get all that flexibility when you leverage really best-breed third-party applications.
Hey, Jeff, while you've got the floor, I've got another one I want to throw your way, and others can jump on to your answer to this question. But one of the keys to success in the SaaS marketplace is the transparency, if you will, that goes along with these applications. That is, in many cases, you could try before you buy. There's even a fair amount of freemium models out there, which allow people to use various versions, simple versions, basic versions of SaaS apps or cloud services for as long as they like, without even having to pay a dime for the privilege. But obviously, it's all about converting those free users into paying customers. Talk a little bit, first of all, based upon your experience of what you're seeing, but then secondly about what your tool does to help people manage that process. And we'll hear from some of the other folks about what they're doing in this space as well.
Sure, absolutely. So, the question is around different type of pricing models, how we help companies kind of launch and manage different variations of pricing. I think first and foremost, right, we give you a common framework to say, do you want to start off with a freemium model? Do you want to start off with a per-user model? Are you a cloud company that says, I need to do metered pricing based on CPUs or gigabytes? Maybe you want to have a tiered structure that is volume and capped. So tier 1 is X, tier 2 is Y. Maybe you're like a cell phone plan that says, well, I have an overage unit, and if you exceed your allocated plan of 500 text messages, you get charged at 25 cents a message. So we give the common framework to say any type of variation of pricing that you want to configure and bundle together, you have that flexibility. And really where we find our customers really leveraging our tools is they don't know what pricing they want to start off with and what pricing they're going to end up with. So they need that common framework to say, I'm going to experiment, and I'm going to start off with a freemium model and have a market share capture strategy where I'm just going to sign up as many people as possible, and then when I sign up all these people, I'm going to throw them upsells and cross-sells into more premium features and get them hooked on our product. Or maybe you want to start off with a free trial, and your free trial is a 30-day free trial that automatically converts into a paid subscription where then you start to collect cash right there upfront, monthly or quarterly or annual. Or finally, maybe you have an addition strategy, and if you have followed like the pricing models of Salesforce.com over the many years, they started off with really one pricing plan, $50 a month. Then they said, you know what, we need to have a group edition that starts off with 5 users and is capped, and that's $9.99 per year. Then there's professional edition at $65 per month. Then there's enterprise at $125 and unlimited. But if you look underneath there, there's a whole bunch of other add-on features, and now they're acquiring companies such as Radian 6, and Radian 6 charges by topic, for example. So Zora powers, how Salesforce.com Radian 6 can automate the billing based on topics and tiers. So Jeff, to your question, really, we help companies universally by providing them with a common framework to have ultimate flexibility to do whatever type of pricing and packaging they want to do as their business launches and as their business matures and changes.
Terrific. Now, Jake, from a licensing point of view, let me bounce back to you and see what the implications are there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great parallel. As your billing relationship with your customer changes from free or an eval to a paying, you also need to change those rights, and how you're controlling those rights. So you may have, for example, a very initial limited feature set in that trial, maybe a limited number of tickets that could be created in a trouble ticketing system, for example. But then once they move to paying, you're going to need to update those rights. You're going to want to, and then control around those rights, and that's where we come in. So that new subscription is the request is created in Zuora, and then a request to our Sentinel Cloud environment would be something like, here's a new customer, and here's what they've purchased. Please authorize these sets of rights for this customer. Whether it be a set of features or a set of features plus a specific license model. And then at the end of the billing cycle, we've been collecting usage around those features. So if it's a metered model, like one of the examples Jeff mentioned, we would be collecting that usage throughout that period, and then aggregating that and making it available to Zuora, so that Zuora could then create that invoice based on that metered usage. So it's really a hand-in-hand relationship to deliver the overall solution to a customer.
Now, I'm going to change or shift to a different question. An interesting question came up about how SaaS should cater to an organization's business processes. And I think that's a perfect question for Eileen to talk about, because you were, in fact, referring to those business considerations in the software development process, Eileen. So talk about what you do to work with ISVs to make sure that their SaaS solutions match the business process of their target audience or target customers.
Well, the first thing we do with our customers is really try to get them to focus on what is it that they are doing that's possibly different from what they're doing on their on-premise, or the same. You know, if they just say, I want to do the same thing and I've done it on-premise, our usual answer is, let's think about this a little more, because you're going to SaaS for a reason, and it's not to give the same experience, the exact same experience to the exact same people. And so what we do is ask them to think about, are you trying to widen your market and go to possibly smaller businesses which need a different business process, or are you trying, what are you really trying to do in your business, and why are you going to SaaS? And so we get them to talk about that, and then from there focus on, now what is that? What are the business processes that are really important in that part of the market that they're trying to release this SaaS product to initially? And so, it's one of these things where if somebody hasn't thought that through and all they want to do is just take what they have and move it, then they're probably not going to do that well, because there are a lot of different things that you can do now with a SaaS model that you couldn't do with on-premise. I mean, you heard about a couple of those from Jake and Jeff about the billing and the licensing and all the flexibility you have, and that's very important in understanding what the business processes of your clients. And so, you've got to get them to do something different and think through what that difference really means to them.
Yeah, I think that fundamentally what's changed the entire landscape of the marketplace is the way in which companies like Salesforce and pioneering the SaaS space and others in the cloud arena as well have done, is they've actually designed their solutions with the end user in mind, and started with that orientation and then expanded their functionality to appeal to the overall organization from a business process standpoint. But if it weren't for the fact that we have the opportunity to design applications to meet the individual needs of the end user, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But what's interesting is, even in the integration space, Rick, you and I have talked over the past couple of months about some of the new features and functionality that Del Boomi is rolling out, in which you can see through your eyes and the monitoring that you're doing of the integration transactions, how some of those business processes are evolving and how applications are meeting those needs as well. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that's happening, I think this is a very timely question, is that IT is the organization that is sort of uniquely positioned to see across all the individual orgs. They have the view across a entire business process that might span finance, sales, marketing organizations, and they are beginning to take a much more active role in. I guess I'll start by calling it a discovery process of what SaaS applications an enterprise actually has deployed, because it's always more than they thought it was going to be. But then how does that impact the business processes, and how can they achieve the desired level of automation across those? So whether it's being able to streamline the process of what happens when a sales rep closes a deal and a Salesforce automation to make sure that finance gets clean and accurate customer and order information, whether it's how the support organization interacts with the customer post-sale, and ensuring that the sales organization has visibility into that, so that there's a single view of the customer, and when you engage a customer, are they having a problem or not? That type of information is just incredibly valuable. And I think one of the opportunities that cloud brings us is the ability to proliferate SaaS applications in an enterprise. But I think that underscoring that is critical, that we still have that cross-organization view, because the first time your business gets audited for whatever audit is relevant to the industry you're in, maybe it's SOX, or maybe it's HIPAA, or maybe it's a SaaS 70 audit, or whatever it might be, you're gonna be forced to give a lot of those answers that I just said. And so I think integration, when you start to think about cloud and these applications that used to sit on-prem to do the things I just said are now moving to the cloud, I think that integration becomes in the limelight. So enabling customers, to your point, Jeff, to be able to monitor the data that's moving between cloud and on-premise, and also enforce encryption and enforce security, so that it's out of the option of the person who built the integration. They build the integration, and an ops team ensures that it's encrypted. Good example of that type of compliance that businesses are being put through as they start to move to the cloud.
Well, what's interesting, again, is that we just got a question asking, how do you go about convincing a customer that they are ready for SaaS to run some of these business processes? And from Think Strategy's point of view, what we're seeing is far fewer IT and business decision makers, first of all, asking what is SaaS or why does it exist, and more of them asking where, when, and how they should take advantage of SaaS alternatives, because of the growing proof points among the successful deployments we've seen over the past 5 years or so. But yet there are still a lot of folks who are somewhat apprehensive about these alternative solutions, web-based and all the rest. And I think you did a great job, Rick, of talking about the security aspects of that, in fact, have proven to be far more rigorous in the cloud than they may be behind the firewall for a lot of organizations. Jake, or Jeff, or Eileen, any thoughts about when you're talking to enterprises, what they should be thinking about and why they should be moving in this direction?
Jake, you want to take that, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, Jeff, feel free.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think why enterprises won't want to move in this direction. I think if you look at the latest, statistics on enterprise cloud and SaaS adoption, it's up in the 80%, and that is, I think CIOs of Fortune 2,000 companies have at least one or more SaaS applications that become standard in the enterprise. So I think the first reason why ISVs want to move to the cloud is that if you look 3 to 5 years from now, that is all that's going to be in these enterprises. It's going to be a conglomerate of best-of-breed SaaS applications, and absolutely you still will have some on-premise applications. You still will have applications behind the firewall, but you're going to start to see really kind of the onion being peeled, and more kind of SaaS applications proliferate inside kind of a company's infrastructure as standards, because they deliver higher business value to the end users. They're easier and more cost effective to maintain, and you don't get stuck with a set of features that get stale. You're able to get the innovation that SaaS and cloud providers offer. We've run at Zora 34 months of consecutive features and new releases to our end customers. So every single one of our customers is on the exact same platform, on the exact same release schedule. They get access to all new features. So I think that is the reason why enterprises want to start adopting and moving to these type of applications.
And just to add to that, I think this question, if you think about the point of view of the person asking the question, it's really, how do I convince them to adopt SaaS? It's likely because they're already selling them on-premise offerings. So from that point of view, I think it's important to think about the motivation of the customer. So in some cases, if you have a SaaS offering, you really aren't having to convince that customer to purchase a SaaS offering as opposed to your on-premise offering, because it's a completely different customer. So I think that's important to keep in mind. If you're doing a new SaaS offering, you're an existing established on-premise ISV, and your SaaS offering, in many cases, may be catering to a completely different market. We'll say, going downstream into a SMB type market. And there, I think SaaS is really well established and well accepted. So that's not really that big of a challenge. Alternatively, and this actually we see from a lot of our customers, is really the convincing to use SaaS is easy when you couple the method for delivering the solution with use cases that can't be solved in on-premise. So one example that I'd like to share is we have a CAD/CAM customer. When you think CAD/CAM, you definitely think on-premise application. A lot of local processing, a lot of complex features that go into designing something very complex. And there are SaaS-based offerings that have been layered on top of that on-premise offering that are easy to sell to what is typically a very conservative customer base, because those use cases can't be solved in on-premise in quite the same way with the same level of flexibility. So I really think convincing the customer to go with SaaS is all about the right fit, and in some cases who the customer is to begin with. So I think those are important things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Now, Eileen, you play the role of the canary in the coal mine, and by that I mean that you're at the front end of this process. You're being asked on a number of occasions by a variety of folks to help with software development challenges that they're facing. From a trends perspective, what are you seeing in terms of the uptick in interest and demand to move in this direction?
Well, luckily for us, there's definitely a strong move to want to move to SaaS. It's interesting that some of the customers we have, a lot of their main reason for moving to SaaS isn't just because they think it's cool. It's because they actually see a much bigger market that they can reach by going to SaaS, because they can have lower price points. They can really they can see some of the things that they can change and make better in their SaaS product. And I think, in addition to what Jake and Jeff were saying, is I think moving to SaaS, again, it is what market you're trying to get to, and we've seen so many of our customers say, I want to take this down to the SMB market. If they're in the big enterprises, and it's a completely new product, and you can really sell that into those products, and they're ready for it at that point. But what we're seeing is interesting is what's I would have thought as a developer, gosh, we ought to all go to SaaS. It's the new thing. There's a lot of clear benefits with SaaS for the ISVs in particular. One of their biggest benefits is they can provide lower price points to their clients. They can broaden the market presence, so they can actually get new revenue because of this. Where was I going with that? But with the clients, you want them to also think, what am I getting out of this? And so, what we want to do here is make sure that make sure that the ISV really does understand what they're trying to do with their product and provide what's the best in that product. But I have to say that there's a number of clients, a number of software companies, and some very large ones that we talk to that don't have SaaS strategies in place. And that surprises me because I think they're going to be behind in about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're going to be the exception to the rule, and unfortunately the rule is going to be around SaaS and the cloud. You know, we're running up against a very strict deadline. The system actually shuts down at the top of the hour, and I don't want to allow that to happen without letting our host, Jake, who's helped to facilitate this series with the support of SafeNet, get away without giving us the last word, and then I'm going to hand the baton back over to Michelle with kind of a call to action for folks who are on this line who can take advantage of the ongoing campaign which SafeNet has put together in support of this series as well. So, Jake, give us your view about the major takeaways that our listeners ought to be thinking about at this stage of the game.
Well, I think really it's just a recap of what we've discussed here. There's start with the business strategy, come up with a plan that works for your markets that you serve, and the core expertise, the core functionality that your company delivers, and then from there map out a plan and leverage partners to do it, and integrate those partners in a way that allows you to get to market faster in a more complete and successful way. So really, pulling this all together, whether it be Eileen, Rick, Jeff, their companies all have great capabilities and great offerings and are experts in this space. So my recommendation is to use obviously us plus each of them, excuse me, in delivering a cohesive product to the market.
Well, it's been fun to be a part of this wrap-up of the series, and congratulations again on putting together a terrific set of webinars that I think has helped to educate ISVs about what it takes to be successful in the cloud and to deliver meaningful and profitable SaaS solutions. I want to thank Eileen and Rick and Jeff, as well as you, Jake, for letting me be a part of this process and helping to facilitate this conversation. And Michelle, you've done a great job putting it all together in the background, so I'm going to let you have the final word and tell our listeners what they can do next to take advantage of everybody's services and capabilities.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank all of today's panelists. Your achievements and willingness to share them with the rest of us is really appreciated. Just a reminder, we did get a few questions that whilst this is the last event in our Let's Do It in the Cloud webinar series, all 5 events are now available on demand via BrightTalk. That is the webcast platform that you're dialed into now. So please don't hesitate to either review any of the sessions or share this content with your friends and colleagues. In addition to it being available on demand, if you come across any additional questions or don't feel that your questions were answered here or on any of the past events, you can either continue tweeting using the hashtag Let's Do It in the Cloud or #LDIITC, or you can email us directly at sas@safenet-inc.com. Again, that's sas@safenet-inc.com. Any questions that are received to that email alias will be routed to the appropriate executive presenter at any of the organizations that participated in this webinar series. So on that note, I'd like to thank everyone, and we all look forward to seeing you in the cloud. Thank you.